Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brandon Burbank, and I'm the founder of the Comeback to Success podcast, where I have the great pleasure and opportunity to interview a lot of wonderful guests who might have a lot of experience around helping people who suffer from mental illness, mental health challenges, as well as interviewing individuals who might be struggling with their own mental health challenges, but have successfully found innovative ways to cope through their challenges and focus on a successful recovery. So, a little bit of background about me. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so I was really inspired and felt called to be a motivator and be an innovative person to help change lives and impact other people who are also impacted by mental illness. And so, with that being said, I'm excited to give you guys a great podcast episode where I have the great pleasure of interviewing Dr. Les Young. He's a pediatrician based out in Southern California. And Les is a UCLA trained pediatrician. He specializes in helping children with ADHD and specific learning disorders. And so, with that being said, Les, we're happy to have you on the channel for today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Brandon. This is something I've been looking forward to because mental health is such an important issue. So I want to certainly help to spread the word and share some of my experiences with the audience.
That's great. Yeah, I think you have so many other valuable experiences with your training as a doctor and also your viewpoint on mental health. I think it's stellar and super helpful to help give us another perspective on how to approach our lives in a better and healthier way. So with that being said, we're going to go into the quite few questions in the podcast interview to help give the audience a better understanding about mental health and the viewpoints to help serve other people and give them more awareness. Les, you ready to go?
I am.
Okay. So, Les, the first question we have is with your experience as a doctor, what would you say to someone who needs intervention with their mental health?
First of all, I want to normalize and, as much as possible, destigmatize mental health because this is a topic, unfortunately, has been tainted with so much stigma over probably centuries. So the first thing I will approach is I would say, and this is entirely true. It's not just lip service. Is that almost everyone would experience some mental health issues or crisis at some point. The degree and the type of mental health condition will vary between different individuals, but the fact that there will be some challenges with their mental health is almost a universal condition. And I would sometimes, if I see the patient is the right candidate, I will share my own mental health struggle with them so they can see that, oh, this is truly something that will affect everyone, including their doctor. And I want to also emphasize the point that sometimes people will want to give up on their fight in their mental health struggle because it feels so hard and sometimes it feels so hopeless because many of these people they've been struggling for years.
Mhm.
But I want to tell them that it is something they don't have to stay this way. They don't have to live life this way because this is no way to live. And things can get better, but it doesn't get better unless you work hard toward that goal. So setting goals and reaching out to the right people, finding the right resources to help you along the way. These are all very important.
That's so important to think about. I think you have a lot of good ideas in that response, Les. But specifically, when it comes to, you mentioned about how people who have a mental illness or who have their challenges with their mental health are going through these challenges. Why is persistent and why is having persistence important for those who are working on their recovery?
Well, I think the greatest challenge is that um, giving up fighting is so much easier than keeping on the struggle. And because working toward recovery is not easy, I can share with my own experience that when I was going through a bout of very severe anxiety
Yeah.
attack,
Okay.
it was very hard for me to go outside and continue to live my life. And yet I knew intrinsically that this is very important on the road to recovery if I start to basically cutting out connections that I used to have and just sequestering myself inside my own bubble. Things will only get harder and more difficult, basically building a wall around me. So I would do everything that I can to just force myself to go outside, maybe just for 10, 15 minutes. And I will gradually make that longer and longer. It's hard work, no doubt. And it's so much easier to just let your mental health kind of overwhelm you and let it control your life. And but we all know that this is no life that we can really call something that anyone should deserve to be mired in.
Wow. Yeah, that's so great. That's an interesting answer, Les. I appreciate you sharing that. The next question that we have is, what are tangible ways that individuals can start to generate growth in their mental health recovery? By tangible, I mean like specific, measurable results that are actually getting them working, whether they get back into a job, get back into school, and maybe get into a relationship that's healthy and that gives them purpose.
Right. I would say the first thing is to set realistic goals, and but you have to be careful because it needs to be kind of gradual and graded. Uh, because if you want to say, getting a new job or relocating to a different place, if that goal is set so daunting and it may be too overwhelming for you to get there, but if you set small goal that will get you there ultimately to that final destination, then it will be digestible and it will be more doable.
That's really
Um,
awesome.
and then in the process, I think reaching out to find supportive friends and family to help you and support you along the way is so important. And it may surprise you because sometimes you find out who are the real people who are equipped to help you the most. And it may not be obvious who those people are. For example, I know a friend who lives in Australia. She was initially relying on her husband and her parents to help her deal with a severe bout of depression. And yet she found out that they are they're not comfortable really talking about mental health issues, and they're not able to support her the way that she needed to be supported. And a lot of her friends, they felt really awkward. They didn't really know what to say. So one by one, they started falling away. And ironically, it was me who live in Los Angeles and she lives in Melbourne, Australia, who found there's a way to connect. We live in different time zones, so we have to kind of figure out the different ways to communicate when one of us is, or both of us are awake. But ironically, she had to reach across oceans to reach to someone who can really understand what they're going through. So it may not be the closest family members that can help you. It may be someone who are more distant or someone who maybe they haven't reconnected for a long time. But the most important thing is to have the courage to reach out to find these people and to find out who are more experienced in dealing with these issues.
Okay, yeah, I think that's so true because for me, as I reflect on the way I've been able to ask for help from people, with as an example, with my family members, sometimes because they have so much history on my own mental health, it can be hard to get an outside opinion and perspective that is like more of a non-judgmental way and a way to give myself perspective from a clearer lens. Like, for example, seeing a therapist is another great way that I utilize to expand my horizons and really reflect on myself so that I can help myself in a more constructive way. And also having the power to recognize that certain people in your life might be supportive of you, but being able to talk about the real and the hard parts about your journey and your mental health struggles, it's not for everybody. And that's partly due to the stigma that exists in our world today. But as we're continuing to have more open conversations and dialogue with people, eventually we can start to see people becoming more open-minded about the conversation of mental health.
I totally agree. Right.
Okay, so the next question we have is, what are some valuable approaches for someone with a mental illness to maintain a happy and thriving lifestyle?
This one is fairly easy for me because, at least for me, I think the most important thing in life that really infuse meaning and a deep sense of satisfaction is the connections that we make for the people that we love. So maintaining a meaningful social connections with the people who really understand you, who are willing to be invested in your mental health and well-being is the most important thing. Um, so reaching out to and then setting up ways to maintain that connection again is hard work, but it's so essential for getting to your goals.
I completely agree with you, Les. So, my own perspective about what I've dealt with for many years in my 20s, when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 19, I went into the deepest isolation. I was antisocial. I had no social skills. I had to relearn, and I still struggle with social anxiety sometimes. And that's where I have to be able to position myself in a more humble approach and letting go of the pride that I have for myself so that I can have more engaging and fulfilling conversations with people. That's what's helped me in my own recovery, and it's still ongoing. But the fact that I recognize that and notice how I can improve myself, having those better, meaningful connections are super helpful and healthy to have in our lives. Okay, so number four, what are some examples of how someone in mental health recovery should not be living their life? And what are common habits that someone should take out of their life?
Um, well, you mentioned in the previous question that, isolating yourself is probably one of the worst things you can do. And yet that's almost instinctively people try to do when they're suffering because they don't want to be appear as weak, or they will maybe feel ashamed of their condition. But other things, for example, it's also easy to, instead of reaching out to medical establishment and psychiatrists and therapists, it's easy to fall into the habit of abusing medications, prescription medications, or illegal drugs, or consuming alcohol. So all these things, they can temporarily numb the feelings and the struggles that you're going through, but they only make things worse. Of course, we realize that, but when you're mired in the depth of your depression, it may be hard for you to see that. It may be hard for you to dig yourself out of that hole. So staying away from chemical dependency, I would say, generally, is very important.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Les. And then with your background as a doctor, what is the biggest difference in how a child is treated with a mental illness versus an adult?
Yes, dealing with children is interesting because as a pediatrician, when I interact with my patients, I interact through their parents. Some of them are very young. Some of them obviously are nonverbal, and well, very young infants don't typically experience mental health issues. As far as we know, we guess we can't really ask them. But even younger children, they might not manifest, their mental health struggles might not manifest the typical way. So if a child is going through depression, they might act out, they might be aggressive, they might be withdrawn, they might be uh, doing something delinquent, they might suffer academically. So there are many, many ways that the typical mental health conditions can manifest in children, and it's not always clear. So it's really up to the vigilance of the parents to determine, okay, something's wrong, and then to reach out to the doctors to determine and find out the help that they need. And also, even after you establish a diagnosis, it's a lot more difficult finding community resources that can help children than to help adults. Obviously, adults garner a vast percentage of the population in the community, but children, let's hope that they grow up to be adults and they will become the future of our community. Um, but the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot less resources, and that's doesn't seem to be getting any better. So a lot of times I spend working with social worker or our kind of safety net in our community to find the resources. And when every time I find something, I will ask my patients to give me feedback on how the service went, because if this is a very helpful service, I can add that to my database so I can refer other patients to this service and or organization.
Okay, wow. I'm learning so much from you right now, Les. It's amazing. Um, and then how can the mental health community become less stigmatized in our society?
I would say talking about it like we are doing now, you're promoting mental health issues and awareness. This is very important. Uh, and I obviously, as you know, I belong to the Rotary Club, and just happens that yesterday morning we had our mental health walk um, in three different areas in LA and Orange County. Um, by bringing it out in the light, by having the discussion in the public is so important. And also, I want people to eventually feel comfortable sharing their own struggle, which is it's a big ask. But
Yeah,
if you're able to do that, you're basically becoming an ambassador in helping other people who may be struggling, who may be too ashamed to talk about it.
thank you
And
for saying that.
yeah, and what's very interesting is that I just very timely fashion on Saturday, I took my son to watch a movie. This is the new Marvel movie Thunderbolts,
Hmm.
and I don't know whether you had a chance to watch the movie already, but
I have not.
to my surprise, for the first time, I'm watching a superhero movie where the premise of the entire plot evolves around mental health.
Oh, wow.
All the major characters in the movie, all the superheroes, the protagonists, people who seem very strong and invincible, they're struggling with their own demons. They're they're facing their depression, they're contemplating suicide, and the the antagonist of the movie, literally, and the climax, I don't want to give spoilers, but literally he was fighting his own bipolar disease with his own fist. I mean, he was smashing his bipolar disease. So it's refreshing and extremely validating to see mental health issue to be portrayed in popular culture. This makes it much easier for people to talk about it, because people say, "What did you do this weekend?" We watched the movie, and can you believe that superheroes are dealing with mental health issues too?
Oh my gosh, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Les. Wow. Yeah, that's really profound, and I don't know what else to say besides that. Okay, so what inspired you to become a doctor and serve people in this way?
Well, I truly believe that it takes someone who really experienced suffering to really understand another person's pain. I The reason I became a pediatrician is that as a child, I grew up with very severe eczema or atopic dermatitis. This is a skin condition where basically the skin gets very dry and itchy, and it causes tremendous amount of discomfort, scratching, and pain. And it's a chronic condition, so there's no easy cure. And having to live through that during my entire childhood, and being hospitalized multiple times to treat the condition, really allowed me to understand what other people who are suffering through various different conditions. And the doctors and nurses who helped me as a child, they became my role models. They became my superheroes. So that's when I decided that when I grow up, I want to be one of them who can not only pay back and contribute to the community, um, but really um, reversing the role or conquering my own demons. Ironically, my eczema is actually back for some reason. So, uh, and the fact that I went through a bout of anxiety really made me a better doctor, I would say. Someone who's never suffered, I think it's really hard for them to fully comprehend what another person who's going through this is feeling.
Yeah, that's so great. I think empathy is another thing that what I've learned from in my own personal mental health journey, it's helped me to be empathetic with with the people
I
who I'm trying to
apologize.
serve in the mental health community.
So my dog is going crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and then how are the youth affected by the increasing use of social media?
Well, social media has become so pervasive that it's become a part of our lives. And it's not just the youth, because oftentimes I even find myself spending a lot of time scrolling through things that I didn't really intend to spend an hour on social media. But for the youth, they're less equipped at interpreting what they're seeing on social media. The fact that people are really presenting a curated version of their lives on social media. So it seems like everyone is having fun, everyone is having the time of their lives. And yet, I can guarantee you, many of those people, even influencers who are sharing their lives, their apparently glamorous lives, um, are likely to be going through something dark and painful themselves. But they don't tend to share that with the public because that's just customarily not done. So what happens is that they feel like they're the only one who's suffering, and they're the only one who is not having fun, and they're incapable of experiencing life fully. And not only do they experience this fear of missing out, but they also feel like there must be something wrong with me, and the isolation can become more intense. And also, when you're interacting with social media, obviously you're not going outside the house and interacting with the world and um, have this in-person deep connection with the people around you.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think that social media, that's where we have to kind of create our own boundaries and limits with social media, even as kids and also as adults, because sometimes there's a lot of like tempting ways that we can spend our time on social media, and then eventually, so much time has gone by, and then you feel like I've noticed when I'm on social media for too long, I feel emotionally drained. I feel like I feel sometimes jealous, or just like I'm comparing myself to the other people who showcase their lives in only one way. And even for me in a more vulnerable place, sometimes I've still struggled with that. And that I'm trying to work on being more vulnerable with people, not just on social media, but also off camera, and having engaging conversations with people.
Right. But I also want to point out that social media sometimes can be helpful because my friend, the way she reached out to me is through social media. So without social media providing that connection, there wouldn't be any way, wouldn't be any possible way for me to be checking in with someone in Australia on a regular basis. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So you have to use it wisely. It could be a useful tool, yet it can be very damaging for your psyche.
Wow, yeah, that I totally agree with you. Thank you for saying that. And then, so our last question that we have is, what do you do in life that keeps you happy and well?
Um, Many things, but I think two of the most important things is that I think exercise really provides me with a foundation for my overall fitness, but not only physically, but mentally. Um, when I was feeling anxious, I felt that one of the only things that could temporarily bring me out of that anxious state is when I exercise. I lift weights. I'm a runner. In fact, I ran the Orange County half marathon yesterday.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, I do running on a regular basis,
Me
and
too.
running is it's a community too. So so segue into that, the second most important aspect of keeping keeping my mental health in a good place is fellowship. We're connecting with other people, spending time with other families, with friends, and also with my dog who doesn't always behave, but I don't know, it's appropriate. But here she is. You can see her.
Aw.
Yeah. So spending time with her because sometimes I feel that spending time with her is more therapeutic than spending time with some of my friends because I know she doesn't judge me. She she accepts who I am, and she doesn't talk back. She just barks.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Les. Ladies and gentlemen, Les Young. So with that being said, that wraps up our podcast interview for today. I hope that any of you, for the viewers out there who were able to resonate with some of the thoughts and viewpoints that Les was able to kind of break down and give another perspective from a perspective of a pediatrician. We're just hoping that this is going to give you more encouragement, perspective, and feedback so that you can continue to grow, continue to define yourself, and focus on the things that are making you happy and your own wellness for your recovery so that you as an individual can be sustainable. Now, from somebody from my vantage point who struggles with mental health and is trying to be a happy and healthy individual, I can tell you right now, keep trying and keep giving up. One last question to ask Les. What is one piece of wisdom that you want to give to the audience before we end this podcast?
Well, I actually think this is one of the secret that people don't really consider. But the greatest ask, the greatest task that can help yourself, may be the act of helping someone else. There's so much meaning in that, and a lot of times people think that if you extend yourself, spending time and money and effort to help another person who's in need, seems like a selfless act. But in a twisted way, it can be a very selfish thing because when you're what you're doing is you're really enriching your own lives and putting meaning in your own life and then giving purpose to what you do. So doing something good, being kind to another person, and reaching out to those who are in need can sometimes be the best medicine for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Les. And thank you again for all of our viewers who tuned in to today's episode. Stay well, take care, and God bless you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon.